Although 2024's Roadhouse isn't perfect, it is the first 80s action movie remake to end one terrible trend. Hollywood loves remaking classic movies, but that doesn't mean that audiences and critics want to see the many reimaginings that the studio system offers. That's why 2024's Roadhouse remake was such a pleasant surprise that the modern redo of Patrick Swayze's iconic 1989 action movie turned out to be a fun, self-aware thrill ride with its own style and storyline. By Roadhouse 2024's ending, the Jake Gyllenhaal vehicle had managed to emerge from the original movie's shadow. This is great news for 80s action movie remakes, which, until now, were not known for their critical success. The 80s were a pivotal decade for action cinema as stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone's movies dominated the box office. Later in the decade, Lethal Weapon and Die Hard gave action movies a tone that was simultaneously more realistic and more self-aware, helping shape the winking, meta-comic relief of modern blockbusters in the process. However, while 2024's Roadhouse proved mercifully fun, earlier attempts to replicate the decade's action hits failed miserably over the years. Roadhouse ends the trend of bad 80s action remakes. Red Dawn and RoboCop's pointless remakes are a distant memory. Until 2024's Roadhouse, earlier remakes of 80s action movies had mostly been terrible. 2012's Total Recall and 2014's RoboCop both stripped the original movies of their gory action and their biting satirical wit, leaving them feeling toothless and uninspired. 2012's Red Dawn sapped the laughably jingoistic original movie of its life, resulting in a humorless reimagining that flopped at the box office upon release. Even 2000's Miami Vice, which was better than its admirable reviews implied, was nowhere near as fun as the original series and fared comparatively well only because it wasn't a movie remake. It might be tempting to say that all upcoming 80s action remakes need Jake Gyllenhaal, but there is more to the failure of these earlier efforts. Red Dawn failed largely because the original movie was a product of the paranoid cultural environment of the Cold War, meaning the remake's politics made no sense when it was released. RoboCop and Total Recall both needed the unique style of Paul Verhoeven to succeed since the visionary director managed to balance satirical insight with gruesome R-rated action set pieces. Losing these two vital elements ruined both remakes as they felt sanitized and pointless. Why 80s action movie remakes have been so unsuccessful? Earlier reimaginings of 80s action movies lacked humor. The biggest change that Roadhouse's remake made to the 80s action reimagining formula was adding a sense of humor to proceedings. 80s action remakes need to be funny since the decade is famous for its excesses and absurd trends. Roadhouse 2024's playful references to the original movie prove that the remake isn't taking itself too seriously, while Gyllenhaal's sardonic take on Dalton couldn't be less like Swayze's sincere, original hero. Even Verhoeven's over-the-top satirical action movies never became tongue-in-cheek, with RoboCop and Total Recall rarely winking at the audience or acknowledging their ludicrousness. It is understandable that the remakes of these action movies stuck to their original tone, but this proved to be a fatal mistake. The 80s were a singular decade and what seemed serious then is unavoidably laughable now. If Red Dawn's remake had been able to mock the absurd McCarthyism of the original movie, the 2012 movie might have been a raucous, funny action comedy in the vein of 21 Jump Street or 2017's Baywatch. Roadhouse understood that 80s action movies are too silly to take seriously, and this proved central to the remake's surprising success.